Welcome to this explainer. Today we're jumping right into part 6 of an 8-part tutorial from Virtualization Options LLC, which is a Colorado-based technology research, education, and advisory organization. Now, if you are a system administrator or an IT support pro who already knows their way around IPv4 troubleshooting, and you're currently tasked with helping your organization migrate to IPv6, well, you are exactly in the right place. We're going to strictly focus on the material from Chapter 6 today, really zeroing in on those actionable diagnostic steps you need when your trusty old IPv4 mindset completely fails you.
So to fix those mysterious network hangs, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with unlearning IPv4 muscle memory, then look at the dual stack reality, address and gateway failures, the ICMPv6 and PMTD trap, tunnels, NAT64 and VPNs, and finally wrap up with the golden rules of IPv6. Let's get to it. All right, Section 1, unlearning IPv4 muscle memory. We really need a different troubleshooting mindset here.
You see, IPv6 isn't just a bigger IPv4 with longer addresses. It's an entirely new beast. Fundamental concepts you rely on, like pinging a broadcast address to see what's alive on a subnet, or relying on network address translation for security, they're completely replaced. In the IPv4 world, you'd send a broadcast ping to 255.255.255.255. In IPv6, that concept is dead and gone, replaced entirely by targeted multicast. And because every device is potentially globally routable now, treating NAT as a security boundary is an assumption you literally have to leave at the door. This is a big one. Seeing a link local, a global unicast, and a privacy address coexisting simultaneously on a single interface, that is perfectly normal IPv6 behavior. If your very first instinct when viewing multiple IPs on a single network card is to troubleshoot it as an IP conflict, well, you're falling victim to your old IPv4 muscle memory. Don't panic. This is exactly how the protocol is designed to function.
Moving on to Section 2, the dual stack reality, and what I like to call the illusion of connectivity.
Okay, so modern browsers use a fallback mechanism called happy eyeballs, where they basically race IPv6 against IPv4. Because of this, a broken IPv6 path won't actually give you a hard error page. Instead, it inflicts a silent 250 millisecond latency penalty. Your browser kicks off requests to both protocols simultaneously, and it actively prefers IPv6. But if that IPv6 path is broken upstream somewhere, the browser just quietly falls back to IPv4. The result? Your users aren't going to submit a ticket saying the internet is down. They're going to complain that the network just feels sluggish.
So the crucial takeaway here is that you must bypass this illusion by explicitly isolating and testing each protocol stack independently. You can't just open a web browser to test if the network is working anymore. You've got to get into your command line and explicitly force traffic over one protocol at a time using tools like curl-6 and curl-4.
All right, Section 3, address and gateway failures. Let's look at some local network culprits. When a host comes online, it immediately initiates duplicate address detection, or DAD. If another machine on that segment, like, say, a cloned VM you forgot about, responds, the interface actually shuts that address down and flags it as DAD failed or tentative. And here's the kicker. Without checking for that specific flag in your command line, you will be left completely in the dark as to why that machine has zero global connectivity. Beyond address conflicts, you have to keep a close eye on your gateways. Remember, the Neighbor Discovery Protocol, NDP, replaces ARP entirely, and it relies heavily on multicast. So if your switches lack MLD snooping, your hardware is just going to flood traffic to all ports and cause massive network-wide performance degradation. Also, watch out for router advertisements. In IPv6, DHCP doesn't hand out the default gateway. Router advertisements do. If a misconfigured router starts broadcasting an RA lifetime of 0, it's explicitly telling every client on that segment to instantly drop it as a default route. Next up, Section 4, the ICMPv6 and PMTUD trap. These are the silent killers of an IPv6 network. This right here is the classic path MTU discovery black hole, and it almost always happens because a firewall in the path is blindly dropping an essential ICMPv6 feedback message. Think about it. Your source sends a massive packet, and a router way down the line realizes it won't fit on the next wire. That router does the right thing. It sends an ICMPv6 packet to big message back. But because some well-meaning administrator incorrectly treated ICMPv6 like old-school IPv4 ICMP and blocked it at the firewall, the source never gets the memo. So the connection just hangs indefinitely. If you can ping a server perfectly fine, but an SSH session mysteriously stalls right after the initial handshake, this is your culprit 99% of the time. Small packets work, large packets fail. To cure this, you absolutely must permit ICMPv6 Type 2 on your firewalls. Alternatively, you can configure TCP/MS clamping directly on your router interfaces. Oh, and remember this golden rule for your interfaces. The absolute minimum MTU allowed in IPv6 is 1280 bytes. Never, ever go below that. Seriously, consider this your non-negotiable cheat sheet. These specific ICMPv6 types are absolutely required for your network to function. Never block ICMPv6 entirely. We aren't just talking about simple echo requests anymore. For example, without types 133 through 137 permitted, basic host and router resolution completely breaks down because NDP just ceases to function. Let's move into Section 5, Tunnels, NAT64, and VPNs. Time to troubleshoot those edge cases.
If you're utilizing NAT64 and DNS64 to allow IPv6-only clients to reach legacy IPv4 servers, you really have to watch out for older applications that hardcode IPv4 literals. DNS64 works by synthesizing a fake IPv6 address when a client asks for a domain name, but if a badly written app just tries to connect directly to an IP like 1.2.3.4 without asking DNS first, there is no synthesis. The packet just drops, and NAT64 cannot save you. It completely bypasses the translation. Now, for your remote workers, an unconfigured VPN will either completely block IPv6 or worse, silently leak it. This is a massive blind spot. Your VPN client might meticulously lock down the IPv4 routing table to keep things totally secure, but completely ignore the user's local IPv6 connection. That means their IPv6 traffic routes straight out to the open internet, bypassing all your enterprise inspection tools entirely. You have to explicitly route IPv6 through the tunnel or explicitly disable it on the client side. Finally, Section 6, the golden rules of IPv6. Let's establish our non-negotiable troubleshooting baseline. To wrap things up, keep these rules etched in your brain. Multiple IP addresses on an interface are normal and expected. NDP is your brand new ARP. Specific ICMPv6 types are mandatory for the network to even function. And please, always document your prefix delegations. If your ISP dynamically changes your delegated prefix and you aren't tracking it or designing your subdelegations properly, your internal, statically configured networks will break silently, and I promise you, you will spend hours chasing ghosts. Knowing how fundamentally different these protocols behave under the hood, I want to leave you with a crucial question to go investigate on your own infrastructure today. Are you blindly applying IPv4 logic to modern network problems? Or are your firewalls and VPNs actually ready for the IPv6 reality? Thanks for exploring Chapter 6 of this tutorial with me. Now go check your network.